Thank you for that introduction. I am Kim Deans. I work as a Regenerative Agriculture Coach with a company called Integrity Soils. I work with farmers who want to transform their business and their life through growing soil because they know that growing soil will take care of everything else. At Integrity Soils, we operate on a principle that everything comes back to the soil. Today, I thought I would share with you our transformative process that we use to work with farmers to help them create enjoyable, profitable businesses through restoring their soil health. But to start, I wanted you guys to have a chat to the person beside you and just for 1 minute, think about what the biggest benefit to you would be through improving soil health. I'm going to time it and give you just a minute. So have a chat with the person beside you and I'll check in with you in a minute. Okay, that's the minutes up now. Everyone's looking like they're having some really good discussions and I'm going to have to pull you up. But it does go fast. It started slow and then suddenly you were there. So, as a show of hands, who had a financial benefit from improving soil health? There's one over there, Chuckle. Yep. Who had a climatic resilience benefit? There's a few people. What about improved human health and well-being? Lots of hands for that one, especially after Andre's talk. Very much so. What about plant health? Improved plant health? Plant. I saw you looking like that, Glenn. What about improved animal health? So we've covered all these. Some of you have got lots of reasons in a minute. Yeah. What about an improved water cycle? Yeah. Any other reasons that I've missed? There's so many. So we've covered them all. Awesome. Getting rid of some politicians? Yeah. Possibly. Yeah, so you can see everything we can think about ultimately comes back to soil health. And at Integrity Soils, we're pretty passionate about that. What I hope to share with you today is the difference between change and transformation. It's really time that we transformed agriculture and how it looks and behaves. I want to share with you the Integrity Soils process for improving soil health and working with farmers to access transformation. We're going to talk a bit about attitude and how that's everything when we're looking to transform our business. There's also going to be some soil health tips and some tips for surviving a farm transformation as well. Basically, a pathway to creating vibrant, thriving ecosystems in our farms and profitable and enjoyable enterprises is the name of the game. So firstly, the difference between change and transformation. When we're focusing on change, we're often coming from a focus on the past or the current situation. When we want to access transformation, we've got to look to the future and what we're trying to create there. Change is often directed by the past and things that have gone wrong in the past. Transformation, we're aiming at the future focused all the way. When we look at change, we often focus on methods and processes. And when in farming particularly, there's a lot of talk when you work in the government funded space, which I have done for many years, on practice change. We're changing one input for another, or we're substituting something. That's change, but it's not transformative. Transformative is a whole new mindset and a whole new set of actions that you take, not just swapping something around. Talk that way? Sorry. When we focus only on change, sometimes we're working with a fairly fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset, I guess, is when we're in a state of mind where we think we're too old to learn something new, we want to be told what to do, we make excuses. When we're in transformative mindsets, we're in a growth mindset. We'll never stop learning when we're in that headspace. We also ask a lot of questions, and instead of making excuses, we see problems as opportunities. Change comes about often through an external influence. Sometimes it's forced on us by climate or governments, different organisations. Transformation comes from within. It comes from within the person, within the business, within the industry. It comes from the ground up. Change is often, we'll be talking a little bit more about this shortly, but is very linear in its approach. When we're looking at change, we often take a 1 + 1 = 2 approach. When we want to transform things, we're looking at systems thinking and seeing the whole. When we look at a whole, 1 + 1 doesn't always make 2. So we really have to shift our thinking. Change is often focused on doing it better, cheaper, or faster. How can we do this better? How can we save money? When we transform our farming business, we often have a completely different version that emerges from that process. We do things differently when we change things, but we have a whole new way of being when we transform things. Not all change creates transformation, but transformation always does involve some change. So they are linked. The other thing I thought I would share with you is just to get you thinking about other examples of change in agriculture. Sometimes the thinking we have to put more fertiliser on, or we have to put more of something on, or do we take something out of our system? Do we start doing something different? Like I said before, exchanging one input for another. Transformation is when we completely shift that focus from killing things to growing things in our farm. That totally shifts everything. Transformation also looks like caring for the soil life underneath the soil as our first priority. When we start to focus there, everything above the ground shifts as well. When we're transforming things in agriculture, weeds are no longer something we have to get rid of. They're an indicator of our soil health. They're an indicator of the system. We see challenges as opportunities. When we transform our view, we no longer equate drought with bare ground and skinny livestock and overworked farmers hand feeding, because we can see that that's nature's time to rest and to destock, take a break. Farmers I know who are transforming in agriculture, they're travelling away in a drought. They're not a slave to the animals. They're learning new skills to be more regenerative. That's a transformation, especially from what we see of drought coverage in the media. Transformation also looks like reducing most inputs altogether and making an improved profit. So you can see the difference between change and transformation. You know, farmers I've recently been working with have been certified organic for about a year or two. They've changed their farming system. They no longer use chemicals, and that was pretty much the way they rolled, but they made the decision to get rid of all of them. However, the farm is still suffering from cow health issues. It still has human health issues. There are still waterlogged soils and poor pasture growth. Another farmer who'd been certified organic for a similar amount of time, who addressed soil health first and started shifting the way he thought and looked at the farm, he has now no longer got waterlogged soils, and he's just down the road. He's growing more grass. There's really good milk quality coming through. And when you've got improved pasture growth and improved quality, those cows don't need as much grass because they're getting nourished and fed on less grass because it's more nutritious. That completely transforms the business. So there's a lot of fun working with farmers in this space. Another good analogy for change versus transformation that I picked up in my reading was change is what you try to do when you want to stop procrastinating. Transformation is what happens when you stop being a procrastinator. So that kind of sums it up really well. Another way to sum it up is this diagram. When we change something, we just have another version of the caterpillar. We've gone from green to red and spiky. Like, that's change, definitely changed. But when we transform things, we go from a caterpillar to a butterfly. And there is nothing when you look at a caterpillar that tells you a butterfly is going to emerge from that. But that's transformation. And that's, I guess, what we're trying to access in our work with farmers. So, most transformations begin with aha moments. This is mine, okay? So probably 20 years ago, I was farming at Cropper Creek. Does anyone know where Cropper Creek is? Test. Oh, we got a few, Angus, you should know. A few people know. And the field on the right is not the paddock, but this was the closest picture I could find 20 years later when I wished I'd had a photo. We didn't have phones that we cutted with cameras back then. Sounding old, aren't I, back in the day. But I was driving around checking wheat crops with my now ex-husband, and we're looking at the crop, and there was a really bad patch of wheat that it was stunted, it was sick, it had hardly come up. And I said to him, oh God, what's happened here? What do you think his answer was? Any guesses? Herbicide residue, no, but it could have been. It's a pretty chemical dependent system. No, the fertiliser rig ran out. Now, when we were planting, it must have run out on that run, and you could see it, like it stood out like anything where there was no fertiliser. Now, anyone who knows Cropper Creek knows it's pretty well known for good soil. We were farming what we love to call the Golden Triangle, with some of the best soils in the country. Of course, when you farm there, you believe that. And I looked at this patch of crop and just went, oh my goodness, if that's how our soil is, we are in big trouble. We were in the early stages of implementing a succession plan, and all I could think about is, if this is what we're inheriting, how on earth is this business going to be viable? That was my focus. I could have made another decision in that moment, possibly, and gone, wow, we really need to put more fertiliser on. But I didn't see that. I've always been a bit of a big picture thinker. So then I was on a mission to look at how soil health affects succession planning, and I almost did a PhD on it and just didn't, which I'm sort of grateful for. My PhD came from the University of Life, I think, in the end. But I could see we were going to be struggling to implement a succession plan that actually meant that business would be viable. In the end, the family dramas around succession planning were the nail in the coffin, and the farm was probably sold about 3 or 4 years after that incident. But my 2 young boys, who I had to put a photo of in, a bit like Glenn's, and our boys all know each other, they've all grown up near Inverell. They grew up in that cotton industry. We had cotton, a bit passionate there, cotton all around our house. We had cotton everywhere. And it was such a relief when I left that business to know that I didn't need to have those children around the chemicals. That, the air was just full of chemicals for a few months of the year when you were spraying the insects. And while cotton taught me a lot about agronomy and plant science and everything else, it's such a treadmill. And once you start spraying, you have to keep spraying. So, walking that high input farming treadmill in that business, after seeing that, really helped motivate me to look at things differently. So there's always an aha moment in a transformation, and you will probably all have one, especially that you're all interested in organics. But then the journey happens after the aha moment. So my journey's looked very different there than it did where it started. This journey's involved my husband Angus, who's sitting quietly up the back there, who's pictured there with fence posts. So I happened to meet a very also passionate farmer in Angus not long after my first marriage ended, and we ended up buying a very degraded block of land near Tinga, near Inverell. This soil was very different to the Cropper Creek soil that I had farmed previously. It was granite soil that had been mined for tin at the turn of the early 1900s. So we were starting with not much, and we learnt a lot about growing soil. Biodynamics, you can see the flow forms in the picture. Biodynamics has been a big part of that journey. It's sort of our foundation has been grazing management, and also then using biodynamics to grow soil. We've had some pretty good success up until February early this year. We were impacted by the Tinga fire, and we learnt that when you destock to save grass, you burn really well. So, that's been a really interesting journey, but our place looks better at the moment, having destocked before the fire because of drought. It looks better than a lot of places I drive past that have not been burnt. So it really goes to show when you start to shift your focus from what's, the animal to the soil, everything shifts. We've spent a lot of time in that period learning to grow soil, implementing practices. We've studied permaculture. I've studied permaculture. I did some holistic management. Angus has always lived holistic management. I got lucky enough to marry someone who's been fencing and rotational grazing since he can remember. So I've learned a lot about grazing management and the foundation that provides in the process. Also along that, we've probably been at that property since 2004. So along the line, I've also had the benefit of learning through working with hundreds of farmers. I spent 12 years working as a rural financial counsellor in Inverell. and it was a pretty busy job, but all I could see, given my aha moment about the soil, I would be sitting with farmers and their financial statements in front of me, seeing the problems in our soil health reflected in their business, and I couldn't unsee it. When you see it, you cannot unsee it, and that has been a huge learning curve for me, having farmers ringing up and telling me they've had 3 inches of rain, but it's still too dry to sow their crop. I just go soil health. It's not drought, it's not, it's the soil. So that had confounded that and sort of helped me, I guess, keep more passionate about it and keep learning as you go. And it brings me to another interesting chapter, I guess, in my journey in regenerative agriculture, was becoming involved with Nicole Masters and Integrity Soils. Has anyone know who Nicole Masters is? We've got a few people. Yeah. That's been pretty fun. And getting to learn from Nicole, I urge you to Google Nicole Masters and Integrity Soils when you go home and have a look at some of her amazing video footage and her new book that's out. But it's been a really great opportunity to take this regenerative agriculture pathway to another level. And so what we do as regenerative ag coaches at Integrity Soils, we really call ourselves coaches rather than consultants. We don't operate from a coming in and telling you what to do approach. We are there to help transform a business. When we're telling people what to do, that's about change. We're not empowering those farmers. So we're really focused on coaching. We're a team of coaches, educators, and systems thinkers. We have myself and Angus in Australia. We have Jules and Michael in New Zealand. And Nicole is all over the world, currently in Canada, stuck trying to get back into the States. But she spends a lot of her time working in the United States and Canada as well. Again, like I said to you, our focus is on bringing everything back to soil health. We're empowering those farmers to access transformation. And to do that, we have to be committed in our own lives. We have to walk our talk, or a farmer's going to see straight through us, So walking our talk, we can only take people where we can go ourselves, hence our quest to constantly learn more and more about growing soil and transforming lives and businesses. That's where we're at. And every one of us on the team, it's really great fun to work with people who are motivated to look at their blind spots and continuing to transform themselves. We take a really individual approach. I often get approached by people wanting to, do a trial, and we'll throw products out and we'll look at it. That's a conventional mindset. If we're just going to throw compost and biochar and a few inputs out, that's not how we work at Integrity Soils. I always say to them, if you want to work with our process, we have an individual approach. And I'll go through that approach with you in a minute, but we're really going to look at what's necessary in this situation, because if we're doing fertilizer strips, we're nothing more than trying to put conventional eyes of a chemical fertilizer company on a soil. So we totally shift that. We also work with the willing. I like that term. Those people who are already wanting to transform. They have to be willing to be coached and questioned and put on the spot and ask lots of really interesting questions when we work with them. So, they can't just want us to come in and tell them what to do, because that's not a great model. So how our approach, and holistic focus, How our process works at Integrity Soils, this has been developed by Nicole Masters, her 5 M's approach to looking at soil health. So we work with the 5 M's, which are minerals, microbes, organic matter, management, and a mindset encompasses all of that to help farmers create vibrant, resilient ecosystems and profit and enjoyment. Regenerative farmers seriously are the most lit up and fun people to work with on the planet. You go to a room at the moment, in a training organisation, something on, they're buzzing, they're excited. They are just bouncing off the walls with energy because there's something there that's working. And it's so fun. On Monday, Angus and I spent most of Monday on the phone just catching up with farmers that we work with, and it was awesome. They are so positive and so inspired and excited, and some of them are working with the horrible drought apocalypse conditions that we're dealing with at home near Varel, and they're still positive. It's such a cool space. So that is how we work, and I'll go through a little bit more of that shortly. But you can see their mindset encompasses everything. So while we work with soil, a big part of our time is spent working on mindset with our farmer. Think about this. We need to become aware. We have to, as coaches, become aware of our own thinking so we can help our farmers become aware of their thinking. Do fish know they're in water? No, they don't. They can't see the water. They're so surrounded by it and they're swimming in it, it's impossible to see it. The only way you can see the water is to be outside of that tank, outside of that fish tank. So that's how we are with our own thinking, our own beliefs, our own models of how we see the world that are inherited, cultural, educated, all those sort of beliefs. We can operate like a fish who doesn't know he's in water. And those limiting beliefs are sometimes holding us back from accessing transformation in our business. So the beautiful thing about working with a coach, like our role is that we can help shine a light on some of those limiting beliefs. We're outside that goldfish bowl. We have our own goldfish bowl, but we are outside of the farmer that we work with. And we can shine a light on those beliefs and help them see the water that they swim in, I guess. And that's really cool fun. And so today we're going to do a little bit of stuff on that to start. The first thing we look at often is perspective. And shifting the perspective in our business is really powerful. And I want you to, it's going to be interactive today. Everyone's got a pen on their table. I want you to take your pen and I want you to hold it up towards the ceiling and start making circles that go clockwise. Okay? When you've all got your clockwise circles going, now bring your pen down slowly. Really slowly. Oops, that microphone, sorry. To underneath your eyes. Which direction's the pen going? Anti-clockwise. What's changed? Perspective. No one's going again. You're a really good audience. Whenever I do this with farmers, they sit there thinking I'm messing with their heads. But yeah, you change the perspective from clockwise, you bring it down and it's shifted. It's completely different direction. So when we change our perspective, we have a really powerful tool to access transformation. And I love that activity because it's cool messing with people's heads. So you think about your perspective when you're looking at regenerative agriculture or organics, and I meet a lot of farmers who've been trying a lot of things for a long time, and they'll often go, oh, that didn't work. That they're looking at their system with the old eyes. They're not seeing it. You can't look at organic or regenerative agriculture with a conventional mindset because you often won't see the magic that's happening, especially as the process shifts. They'll see the weeds, they'll see the mess, they'll see things that make absolutely no difference. If you want to make small changes, change the way you do things. But if you want to make big changes, change the way you see things. And that's where perspective is really powerful. And again, as coaches, somewhere we look at a lot with the perspective our farmers are looking at. How are they looking at their weeds? And what are their weeds telling us is what we ask them. They just want to know how to get rid of them. So the other thing when we look at perspective, thinking about what are we focusing on in our business? Are we focusing on what we want or are we focusing on what we don't want? It's really, really powerful. And using words wisely is something I learn more and more. And I have Angus to keep me accountable for this. He's nodding. Because when we're saying things in our business, what are we creating? What are we focusing on? I'm a bit with Glenn on the drought issue and how it's being looked at. Because a lot of the time we're hearing people raising money for drought. I hear in that we keep focusing on drought. What about raising money for vibrant, healthy agricultural ecosystems? Shift our focus, and what does that open up? If we just focus on drought, and we've been focusing on it for a while, we're doing pretty well, aren't we? It's not pretty over the range. And how can we shift our focus from that to something more positive? It really does make a huge difference. And just to think about focus on your day-to-day work on your farm. If you've been out chipping weeds, I'm assuming we're organic, we're not spraying weeds, we're chipping them. If we're out all day doing that, have you noticed how you see those weeds everywhere? You drive down the road and they are everywhere because that's your focus. And when you shift your focus, you can powerfully change the course of your day, your business. The other thing that's really important for farmers as far as focus goes is shifting that focus from production to profit. So many farmers over the years see that production got to have the best yielding crop, and it's got to be the best, or I've got to top the sale with my livestock. They never talk about have they made a profit on the animal that topped the sale. I had quite a funny instance a few years ago when my boys were younger. They played cricket, which is a bit torturous to watch as a sport. And I'm sitting in the car trying to look up when they did something, reading the local paper. And, it said, I had to ring Angus. I was quite laughing. We topped the sale and had Angus and Kim Deans top the sale, Sean Hughes. I went, wow, my farmers are going to think I'm a really good farmer now. We're in the paper because that's the measure of success. That paper didn't say there were only 4 sheep in that pen. Looks so good, but there's often something behind that. That doesn't tell you, did you make a profit on those sheep? I've had farmers come into my office and say, I know that I've got to put super on because my neighbour does and he tops the sale. And I'm like, yeah, wow, did he make a profit? Because that's such a more important driver, but we're focusing on the wrong things. And part of my role as a regenerative ag coach is to come in and help shift that focus to where it's going to matter. So that's pretty cool fun. Assumptions is another thing that we work a lot with when we're coaching farmers. An assumption, you might have often heard the term, an assumption makes an ass out of you and me. It's something we do. It's something we assume is true, but we never question it. It's like when we're in that goldfish bowl and we can't see the water we're swimming in. We just believe that's just how it is. But we never have any evidence of that. So with farmers, there's a lot of assumptions going on. Like I said, topping the sale makes you a good farmer. Being too old to change is an assumption. That yields will drop if I don't use chemicals, or I won't be a good farmer if I don't use chemicals. That we will have to lose money to change our system. I have seen farmers operate on that paradigm where they are intent on the fact that it's going to cost them more to be regenerative. It doesn't have to be so. That is an assumption. So that we're making assumptions, all of us, all the time. And it's something we do, in our life. So the main thing to be aware of with assumptions is to catch them. Don't think, that they're good or they're bad. They just are. But be aware of them when you're making them. And it's that goldfish bowl again.
It's not that easy, but Grammarly can help.
There's that video trying to play now. Just thinking about assumptions again. Be aware. Think about how they're impacting on your business, and that's, I guess, the beauty of working with someone who's outside of your business, because they'll spot the assumptions that you might be making because they're outside the goldfish bowl. The other thing we do a lot of when we work with farmers is ask a lot of questions. We question everything, absolutely everything that you do. Why do we ask questions? Because they're going to break those assumptions. They're going to help give you a different perspective on your business. Sometimes I think a lot of farmers think you've got to know everything to be an expert. And often they want to know what I know. They're testing me out. But it's really not what I know. It's whether I can ask the right questions in their business and whether they can ask the right questions. We'll often stop acting on something that's going to transform our business because we don't think we know enough, when in fact we've just got to ask the right questions. So, questioning is huge. Shifting our perspective. The other thing we work with, as I said, we're a team of systems thinkers. So, we look at things as a whole a lot as individuals, and we're trying to develop that skill more in our farmers as well. So when we're a systems thinker, we look at things and see that everything is connected. We shift from linear thinking to a more circular model. When you think about your farming system, everything's connected to everything else. Everything relies on something else for its survival. And often when we see a system, when we look at a system, something new, completely new, can emerge from something that looks totally different, like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. But if you were to look at an egg, would you ever think, if you didn't know that chickens existed, it could come out of a chicken? Like, when we're working in agriculture, 1 + 1 is not always 2. And just being aware that when we're manipulating that system, like we have been with chemicals and artificial inputs, what can come out of that system is not what is intended usually. So we want to pick that up quickly. But trying to help our farmers and our people we work with see that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts is a huge part of what we do as well. I really, really enjoy the story of the blind man and the elephant, and that it's a really good way to just sort of explore systems thinking. There was, it's a bit of a parable that you can find, and there were a group of blind men in a village that heard that a strange animal called an elephant had been brought to town. None of them were aware of its shape or form, and out of curiosity decided to go and inspect it and know it to see how they could get to understand what an elephant was. So they sought it out, and when they found it, the first person landed on the trunk. So he thinks the trunk, it's like, this elephant's like a snake, this is what an elephant is. In his mind, an elephant is now a snake. Another one who landed on the ear thought it was like a fan, because that was his perspective of the elephant. The other person who landed on the leg felt like it was a tree trunk. The one who found the side of the elephant thought it was a wall. Another one on the tail thought the elephant was like a rope. And the last one felt its task, stating that an elephant must be like a spear. Now, all of these were right, but they were all wrong, weren't they? So it's just a really good story of how when we have a narrow view to anything at all, we miss the whole picture. So thinking about all the science that we grapple with, that peer-reviewed science with a narrow reductionist view, is often honing in on a part of the elephant and missing the big picture. And how do we bring in a more holistic view back in? I recently read an article, kind of builds on what Andre was talking about with cancer and glyphosate. And it really hit to me how a really good example of how we miss the point. There were scientists that were looking at glyphosate and breast cancer. And when they tested, exposing these cells to glyphosate, they found no link to tumour growth. But when they combined the glyphosate with molecules that were linked with oxidative stress, that's when the cancer happened. So often we're looking at that one part in isolation and forgetting all of the other factors in that system that make up the elephant in the room when we're looking at our research. And, as people who are sitting outside of that system, we know that, but this is what we're up against, I guess, is that everyone's honing in on parts of the elephant and missing the big picture. So that's where we're at, trying to see the whole rather than the parts. And basically, we spend a lot of time on mindset, but clarity always comes from action. This is a photo I took in January, working with Integrity Soils. Michael in New Zealand says it's not a job, it's an adventure, and it so is. It's the best fun. We've been, in the last year, we've had some amazing experiences visiting regenerative farmers all over the world in some of the trips we've been on, but this was Lindburn Station in New Zealand in the South Island, and the guy, Peter Barrett, who farms Lindburn Station's really passionate about regenerative agriculture, and instead of putting fertiliser on, he started planting cover crops. And this is a country, like an area of the country that gets very little rainfall, gets really a lot of snow in winter, and this was the paddock in January. And it was really exciting to see how excited all the guys that work on this station are about what's happening. I think at first the neighbours are looking, going, what's going on here? But everyone is excited. Like I said, the excitement is palpable when you walk in. But people taking action is so important, because a lot of people start out reading all the right books, doing all the right courses, talking to all the right people, being all the right social media groups, but until you do stuff, you don't learn. So starting to get action happening. We've become a society, I think, that consumes a lot of information, but are we using it? And that's where the rubber hits the road. So often we're working with people to help them use it. But those that are taking action sometimes use a scattergun approach. They go and spread bits of ideas all over the farm and then can't see what's working. And then go, no, that doesn't work. because they're just throwing a bit here, a bit there, not, it's all random. So another thing we often help people do is to really have a strategic action. Randomly throwing different ways of doing things around doesn't always work. Sometimes they might get lucky, but generally I just get confused and disheartened because they know that this stuff should work. They've read all the books, they've done all the courses. It should be working and it's not, but they might be missing some strategic part of the puzzle that we help them put together. Really, there is never a silver bullet. If you're regenerative farming, you are not looking for a silver bullet. You are not looking for someone to tell you the right answer. That is not regenerative, that is conventional chemical farming. There's no copy and paste. I can't go to Glenn's farm and copy exactly what Glenn does at Billabong, at Tinga, and have it work the same way, because it's a different system, different soil, different farmers, different everything. So, it's a really fun area to help kind of be a detective and help work out in each system what's missing. So we get our clients to take action, but we align it with their strategy. It addresses the first things first. We get beyond that overwhelm that people feel when they want to start this path but don't know where to start, and we tailor it to the factors that are going to make a difference on that farm, and we get the foundations right first. So some of the foundations, the most important foundation is monitoring, and it is the one thing that farmers don't do enough of. And I see a few people going, yep. It's like we don't be farmers because we like collecting numbers and data, but monitoring is so important. If you can't see it, you can't measure it. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And if you can't manage it, you can't improve it. But, don't get overwhelmed by collecting data on 50 million things. You collect data on the right things for you. And that's so important. And it helps us focus. It helps us to see, is our soil health and our business going in the right direction, or are we taking a step back? And if we can pick that up, if it's not going where we want it to be quickly, we've got a lot of opportunities to change it. It also, monitoring helps us build our observation skills a lot too. It helps hone our eye, because when we're focusing on something, you can be driving or walking across the paddock and having a really bad day and everything looks really bad because our focus is negative. When you're having a good day, everything's wonderful. So when we're monitoring, we can be affected by that, but the numbers are the data, and that's what drives your system. It also, as I said, when we have a system and 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2, when we're monitoring, we pick up those unintended consequences early and find them. But also a lot of changes happen under the soil first. And if we're not monitoring, we miss it. We had that experience at home. I marched Angus out to our monitoring transect, and we'd put some vermicast extract on a paddock, and visibly we couldn't see much difference. And it hadn't rained, because in the last couple of years, rain's a bit of a novelty over there. But when we got the penetrometer out, the soil was so much softer. So, just taking the time to look and see what's happening is incredibly powerful. Another client who I was working with had a paddock with a lot of flea bane in it, and it was creating a bit of stress, but he was understanding that it was there for a reason and just letting it run its course. It looked like the whole paddock was flea bane. It's, that kind of weed that's just everywhere. So we put some monitoring numbers on it. We did a little exercise called a step point, and it was only 20% of that paddock, but it looked like that's all there was. So sometimes you need the numbers to put it in perspective to see, what am I managing? And next year when he goes back, he can say, is that now 30% or 10%? Is it improving or getting worse? And you monitor that without the emotion behind it. It's really powerful. A lot of our work's based on monitoring. We always set up a monitoring transect on a few sites on the farm, depending on the size of the farm and how much the farmer wants to do. But our monitoring transect is where we come back and take our numbers. And that gives us a site where we can compare apples with apples. We're not going out GPS mapping the whole place because we're not into precision ag. We're just trying to get the system functioning, and we need a site where the data can be replicable and meaningful. So that monitoring transect's a huge part of that. We do a visual soil assessment, and we look at soil physical health. We dig a lot of holes, we look at the soil structure, we look for compaction. And it is amazing how fast and how fun a day can be digging holes with a farmer and looking at their soil health, because there's a lot of farmers who might buy farms and not even dig a hole. we are, having a lot of fun looking at what's going on under the ground. What are the plant roots doing? What's the rooting depth telling us? That's where we start. We also take soil tests off our transect and do have a look at the chemistry in the soil, but we only look at that with everything else, not on its own, not in isolation. We also, when we have moisture, we take soil biology tests and send a few to microbe labs as well, or the soil food web, and have a look at what is going on with the soil biology. Those three tests with a leaf test can give us a really good picture. We come in and we basically take a medical history of the farm. We do a full history. We look at what's happening now and take a lot of measurements to help us find out where are things working and not working in this farm. And a leaf test, a soil test, and a microbe test taken together are a really powerful set of data to look at soil and farm health. We take lots of photos. Now, these days with cameras and phones, it's so much easier to take photos, but when monitoring, a photo is wonderful to have, and it's probably something I look back on our journey at our place and didn't take enough photos of the changes in the soil. So we take photos of the transect, of the cubes of soil we dig out, photos of everything in that visit, and that's part of our monitoring data as well. And to imagine, I imagine the farmers I'm now working with in 10 years' time are going to be presenting stuff with these photos over 10 years to show the changes that are happening. It's exciting. So management and measure, manage, improve is the basis of our approach with our farmers. Nicole Masters also has a triage process, which those of us at Integrity Soils use when we're working with farmers to help transform their business through soil health. If any of you are interested in this, please look at our website and think about purchasing Nicole's book. It was only released last week. It is going to change a lot in the world, I think. It's called For the Love of Soil, and this process is featured in that book as well. So it's a really good resource to learn more. But the first thing in our triage, and she calls it triage because we are often, oh gosh, that's gone quick. We are often treating a patient that is like a critical condition. The first thing we look at, and I'm going to speed up, is solar energy. You think about it, as farmers, we capture sunlight and turn it into soil. And that drives farm profit. We use refractometers in our measuring and monitoring to look at bricks and how effectively we're managing solar energy. Air is the second thing in our process. If you think about, and Nicole always, whenever she presents, she'll tell everyone, so I'll just do what Nicole does. Put your hand over your mouth and nose, and how long will you survive? Not very long at all, because everything that lives needs air. So that's the second thing on our list. And most soils are compacted. If they're compacted, you need nitrogen out of a bag, because where's most nitrogen on the planet? In the air. And our soil life can't live without air. Nothing can live without air. The third thing we look at is water, and how efficiently is that farmer capturing rainfall to drive profit? Is the water cycle functioning on this farm? And as Glenn talked about, soil carbon and soil health is all linked. The fourth thing we look at is decomposition, and are things breaking down? And is mineral cycling working in the system? And then biology. We feed biology in the soil at every opportunity. If you're doing anything that disturbs the soil, we feed the soil at the same time. It's high on the priority. And then we look at nutrients. So we don't go to the fertiliser bag first. It's right down the list of getting all this stuff functioning, because there's no point throwing additives, whether they be organic or conventional, on a soil. If all these things aren't working, they're not going to do any good at all. So that's how we work. And it's really exciting. The first process is do no harm. So we get our farmers to minimise the things that are going to damage their soil health. Cultivation, synthetic fertilisers, overusing compost, pesticides or anything that kills anything, monocultures, overgrazing. There's some culprits, and they're the things we've really got to work with first, because if the management's not right, nothing we do is going to shift it. We then take some strategic actions to restore our soil health, which are often feeding our underground workforce, the biology, maintaining ground cover, whether you be cropping or grazing, that's so important. Putting diversity in at every opportunity, diverse plants, diverse animals, Grazing management is a foundation on grazing enterprises. Like, if that's not working, nothing's going to shift. We buffer inputs when we've got farmers putting on chemical inputs, because that's often where they're coming to us in that state. To get them off it, we start buffering with a carbon source to feed the biology and do less damage. And always repair if something is disturbed. So if some harm is done, come back and repair it. And reminding farmers that if a little is good, more is not better. Because the minute they think something's going to work, well, they'll do more of it, and that does not work. When they navigate that transformation, it's really important to get out of their comfort zone. And that's where it can be really interesting. So I just want you for a minute to cross your arms. Just sit with your arms crossed. Another trick. Now, you're feeling comfortable? Sort of? Try crossing your arms the other way. It's not real. I can't even do it. How does that feel? Uncomfortable. Can you even do it? I find it hard to even do it. So that's what change is like. We wonder why we feel uncomfortable and chicken out. It's like trying to cross your arms the other way. Really, really important to be kind to yourself if you decide to navigate some sort of transformation, because you will be out of your comfort zone. You will feel uncomfortable. It will feel messy. That can trip you up. So it does take a lot of courage for farmers to question your beliefs and how you think, look at new things with new eyes and fresh perspectives, to take new actions, to step into the unknown, and stop worrying what other people think of you, because your farm's going to look different. To stop consuming the knowledge and start using it is all going to take courage. But I often say to people, just trust the process. Transformation's a bit like whipping cream. You whip and whip and whip and whip and whip. Nothing's happening and suddenly it shifts. That's what can be happening with your transformation on your farm. And some people might give up too soon. So thinking about that, that's really important. I'm just going to whip through. Making sure you align with nature. Just all the time we're saying, what would happen in nature to our farmer? What would nature do? That's so important. And you never stop learning and questioning. There's no end point in a transformation. It's continuing and evolving. You don't just wake up one day and go, right, I'm regenerated now. I'll go on to the next level. It doesn't happen. So, realising that it is a journey that never stops, and you never stop questioning and you never stop learning once you're on this treadmill. You also need to surround yourself with a support network. We form part of that role when we're working with a business, but also just getting out and finding people who we're thinking similarly is hugely powerful. To survive, you need to allow time and be patient. It does take time for systems to reboot. You can't just add on stuff. It's not about adding on. It's also not about exchanging one input for another. That is not what we do. As I said before, there's no silver bullets, and we can stop aiming for perfect soil test numbers. That's a bit of a passion for me. It's unaffordable to try and get your soil test perfect, and too many farmers focus on that one part of the elephant. But when the biology is functioning, it all comes into balance. Biology can bring your pH into a better range. They can provide nutrients that were not even in your soil. It's amazing what can happen. That's the transformation. Management always trumps those numbers. Go to a doctor. If you have perfect blood tests, does that mean you're healthy? Not always. Same with your soil test. We treat the whole patient, not just the numbers, and we really encourage people to shift that focus off a soil test. Avoid overdoing anything. We often just do a lot of good with a little bit of a change in something. 90% is your mental attitude, which is why a lot of my focus and my talk's been on how we think. That's 90% of it. But please also, for you navigating your transformation, focus on profit, not production, please. We need to take a view of profit that's not just dollars and cents. Profit is also, there's three banks in a farm as far as I'm concerned. There's your financial, there's your natural capital, your natural resources, and then there's the human capital in your business. And you are not making a profit if you are running down, your natural resources to produce money. That's mining. That's not profit. If you are running down your human resources to survive, that's exploiting yourself, exploitation. if you're tolerating a business that's not making a profit because it's a lifestyle, then that's also eroding your financial capital. It's not regenerative. So a regenerative and profitable business builds capital in all ways, not just monetary. So that's where we have to survive. We have to focus on that. A lot of people want to know how long it'll take. That's one of those things. Well, it depends, doesn't it? How long has your soil been degraded? How much do you want to spend? And addressing the first things first. This is a little diagram of Nicole's that I love, and she calls it the good, cheap, fast. So cheap and fast might not be good. Fast and good might not be cheap, and good and cheap might not be fast. It's a pretty good summary of the ways you have. Have I got a couple more minutes just to keep going, or do you want me to stop? Or I'll just rip through this real quick. So when you've transformed into a regenerative farmer, when you focus on growing soil, and that takes care of everything else. You focus on growing things, not killing things, and weeds become indicators. You don't go anywhere on the farm without a shovel to check your soil and have a look underneath the surface. You get all the rain because the water cycle is working and your soil gets wet, it doesn't run off. You care for the livestock underneath the soil as your first priority, but you are also the expert in your business. You're not putting your power on other people from outside to tell you what to do. And you stop caring what the neighbours think. Farming becomes fun again, and it is so evident to me when I work with these farmers now. Quite a contrast from the days of rural financial counselling. Farmers are having fun in this space, and they're making a profit, which is awesome, icing on the cake. The other thing they do is they start sending me photos like this. These are photos of the rhizo sheaths on crops. The one on the right is in the mallee on some sand, and the rhizo sheath's looking pretty good. So farmers start looking at having, root systems that are nice and covered, in contrast to the one on the left, which was its first year into a different system. And we don't want bare roots in the ground. We want a rhizo sheath to make sure that soil microbial bridge is working. It is such an important thing to be focusing on. That this is a photo of Nicole. She was out in Bingara this time last year. We had a one-day workshop with Nicole, and this became known as the famous oat plant Otis, who has photos taken with Christine Jones and Nicole Masters, some soil divas. It had come to a workshop a month earlier with Christine Jones. These people had grown this oat plant, and it had a beautiful rhizo sheath, and it was the pride and joy of the day of having what you aim for in a plant. It went back home, it went back in the ground. They dug it back out and brought it a month later to the workshop with Nicole, and it's thriving because that rhizo sheath creates the protective zone around those plant roots so that it could survive being out of the soil for a day and go home and come back. So it's quite a famous plant. It's now no longer with us, obviously. But that was, to show you, that's what regenerative farmers start focusing on and getting excited about and bringing them to workshops. I think I'll probably end it there. I think that also for myself and Angus, it's sort of like, what's next? What's the next transformation? And we're looking a lot in the realms of subtle energy and landscapes and people, and that's our passion for the next transformation for our property. But yeah, it's always constantly questioning. You never stop, you never get off this amazing adventure that is regenerative ag. We offer workshops, coaching, resources and newsletters, so please check out Integrity Soils and feel free to contact myself or Angus if you want to talk more about what we do. But thank you.